Right now, as you watch this, somewhere on Earth, a volcano is erupting, not metaphorically, not theoretically, right now. There are roughly 700 active volcanoes on our planet, and scientists estimate that at any given moment, about 20 of them are actively erupting. But what if all 700 went off at the exact same time? Not one, not 10, not 100, all of them. Before we go further, drop a comment right now. Do you think humanity survives this? Yes or no? We're going to find out together. Stay with me because what happens in the first 60 seconds alone will shock you. First, let's get a feel for the scale of this. These 700 volcanoes aren't evenly spread across the planet. About 75% of them line the edges of the Pacific Ocean in a massive arc scientists call the Ring of Fire. Countries like Japan, Indonesia, Chile, and the US Pacific Northwest sit right on top of it. Now, these aren't all equal. Some are gentle lava flows in Hawaii, the kind tourists get close to for photos. Others are supervolcanoes, geological monsters capable of altering Earth's climate on their own. We're talking about Yellowstone in Wyoming, which sits on top of a magma chamber the size of a small city, or Toba in Indonesia, which, when it erupted 74,000 years ago, may have nearly wiped out the entire human species. One of those nearly ended us. Now multiply it by 700. If you've never heard of the Toba eruption, comment TOBA below. I guarantee most people have never been taught this in school. And if this video is already blowing your mind, hit that subscribe button. We cover stuff like this every week. The moment every volcano erupts simultaneously, the Earth doesn't just shake near the volcanoes, it shakes everywhere. The combined seismic energy would overwhelm every seismograph on the planet. Scientists tracking earthquakes wouldn't see individual events, they'd see noise, a global roar. Down the volcanic slopes, pyroclastic flows begin almost instantly. If you don't know what a pyroclastic flow is, imagine an avalanche, but instead of snow, it's superheated gas and rock moving at 700 kilometers per hour. The temperature inside one can reach 1,000 degrees Celsius. You cannot outrun it, you cannot hide from it. If one is heading towards you, your only prayer is to already be somewhere else. Within the first 60 seconds, cities like Naples, Italy, which sits near Mount Vesuvius and the Campi Flegrei supervolcano, simply cease to exist. Tokyo, which lies in one of the most volcanically active zones on Earth, goes dark. Here's a question that's going to divide this comment section. If you had 60 seconds of warning, what would you do? Where would you go? Drop your answer below. I want to see how people think about survival. But here's the thing, the lava and the pyroclastic flows aren't actually the biggest killer. The real threat comes next. Minutes after the eruptions begin, every volcano is blasting ash, rock, and gas skyward. A large eruption can punch an ash column 40 kilometers into the stratosphere, twice the cruising altitude of a commercial airplane. With 700 erupting simultaneously, the combined ash columns would be unprecedented in human history. And as winds carry the ash outward, regions far from any volcano start to go dark. Not overcast, not cloudy, dark, total, complete darkness in the middle of the day. But there's something worse in that ash cloud than the ash itself. Each volcano also releases massive amounts of sulfur dioxide, a toxic gas. When sulfur dioxide reaches the stratosphere, it transforms into sulfate aerosols. Think of them as microscopic mirrors floating 30 miles above the Earth, reflecting sunlight back into space before it ever reaches the ground. Less sunlight means less warmth. Less warmth means temperatures begin to fall, and this is where our scenario stops being a disaster movie and starts being an extinction event. Scientists actually have a name for what comes next. It's called volcanic winter, and before I explain it, I want you to think about this. How long do you think modern society could survive with no sunlight and no crops? Put your number in the comments. Let's talk about volcanic winter. To understand volcanic winter, we need to go back to 1815. A single volcano, Mount Tambora in Indonesia, erupted. Just one. It was the largest eruption in recorded human history. The following year, 1816, became known as the year without a summer. Snow fell in New England in June. Crops failed across Europe and North America. Tens of thousands of people died from famine. Some historians believe it triggered mass migrations that reshaped entire nations. That was one volcano. Now we have 700. Scientists estimate that a major volcanic event could drop global average temperatures by 5 to 10 degrees Celsius within a year. In our scenario, the drop could be 15 to 20 degrees or more. For context, the last ice age saw temperatures drop about 5 degrees globally, but that happened over thousands of years, giving ecosystems time to adapt. We're talking about the same drop happening in months. Growing seasons collapse, crops that have never experienced frost suddenly freeze. Global food production, already strained to feed 8 billion people, begins failing on every continent at the same time. Here's something that genuinely disturbs me, and I want your reaction in the comments. We currently have about 90 days of global food supply in reserve at any given time. 90 days. If crops fail for one full season, we're already in crisis. Does that number surprise you? And while the surface freezes, something else is dying underneath us. The oceans absorb massive amounts of carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds from volcanic eruptions. In normal times, this is a slow process the ocean can handle. In our scenario, it's an overwhelming flood of acid. Ocean acidification accelerates rapidly. Coral reefs, already stressed by climate change, begin dying within months. And here's why that matters beyond the aesthetics of a pretty reef. Coral reefs support about 25% of all marine life. When the reefs go, the food chain collapses from the bottom up. Plankton, the microscopic organisms that produce half of Earth's oxygen, crash. Fish populations follow. The seafood supply that feeds billions of people begins to vanish. Meanwhile, hundreds of underwater volcanoes are also erupting in our scenario. They superheat sections of the ocean, creating localized tsunamis, not just from one source, but dozens simultaneously. Coastal cities already buried under ash and darkness now face walls of water. Quick question, and be honest in the comments. Did you know that the ocean produces about half the oxygen you're breathing right now? Most people learn this and are genuinely shocked. If that surprised you, let me know below. So the surface is frozen. The oceans are dying. What are the 8 billion people still alive doing? Here's what makes this scenario uniquely terrifying compared to any other disaster. It's everywhere at once. With a pandemic, other nations can send aid. With a hurricane, surrounding regions provide relief. With a financial crisis, trade partners step in. But with 700 simultaneous volcanic eruptions and a global volcanic winter, there is no somewhere else. There is no cavalry coming. Governments activate disaster protocols within the first hours, but those protocols were never designed for this. Communication networks fail as ash clouds interfere with satellites. Power grids go down as ash clogs cooling systems. Supply chains, already complex and fragile, collapse completely. Food rationing begins within weeks. Conflict over remaining supplies escalates within months. International cooperation, difficult even in stable times, becomes nearly impossible when every nation is simultaneously fighting for survival. Who survives? Small communities in geographically isolated areas with stored food, clean water sources, and the skills to grow crops in brutal conditions. Not the wealthiest, not the most powerful, the most prepared and the most adaptable. This is the part where I genuinely want your opinion. Do you think governments have any kind of real plan for a civilization-level collapse, or are we all basically on our own? Comment yes or no, and tell me why. This tends to start the best debates in my comment section. But here's the part that nobody talks about. Earth has been through this before, maybe even worse, and life survived. 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano in Indonesia erupted in an event so massive that some scientists believe it reduced the entire global human population to as few as 10,000 individuals. 10,000 people, that's smaller than a small town. That's how close we came to being erased before civilization even existed. 250 million years ago, a volcanic event in what is now Siberia, called the Siberian Traps, erupted continuously for nearly 1 million years. The result was the Great Dying, the largest mass extinction in Earth's history. Over 90% of all marine species and 70% of land species were wiped out. Our 700 simultaneous eruptions wouldn't last 1 million years. Eventually, months to years, the volcanoes exhaust their magma chambers and go quiet. The eruptions end. But the sulfate aerosols remain in the stratosphere for years afterward, continuing to block sunlight long after the last lava cools. Recovery, if it comes, takes centuries. Plant life slowly returns as light filters back through a clearing sky. Isolated ecosystems begin to expand, and whatever remains of humanity, those small, scattered, incredibly resilient groups of survivors, start the long process of rebuilding. This is the part I find weirdly hopeful, and I want to know if you agree. The fact that we exist right now means our ancestors survived Toba. They made it through something this catastrophic with no technology, no medicine, and no YouTube videos explaining what was happening. That's remarkable. Does knowing that make you feel better or worse about this scenario? Tell me below. Here's the good news, and I want to end on this. This exact scenario is almost certainly impossible. The geological forces that would need to align to trigger all 700 active volcanoes simultaneously don't exist. Volcanoes operate on completely independent tectonic systems. But the individual threats are absolutely real. Yellowstone is overdue. The Campi Flegrei supervolcano under Naples is showing increased activity right now. Indonesia's volcanic belt never truly sleeps. We don't need all 700 to go off at once. Sometimes one is more than enough. Earth built everything you see around you, and if it wanted to, it could take it all back before you finish this sentence. If this video made you think, share it with one person, not because of the algorithm, because this is the kind of thing more people should be thinking about. And if you want to see us cover what happens if Yellowstone erupts on its own, that video is next. I'll see you there.